It's 5:45 Eastern Standard Time. It's Wednesday, April 18th. And few fans of professional wrestling, and for a lot of us personally, this day will be remembered as not a good day. Wrestling, the way we knew it back in the golden days of professional wrestling, has lost the leader of what so many of us hang on to as the good old days. We thought he would be here forever, and I never thought that I would ever have to say, Bruno Sammartino, God rest your soul. Early this morning, my pal Sal Carente, who I've known forever, called me, and he said, Bill, you haven't talked to Bruno Sammartino in a long time, have you? I said, I tried a few times. He never called me back, which is very unusual because I used to speak with Bruno every few months in the last few years. Sal, who is very close with him as well, thought it unusual that he hasn't heard from Bruno in quite a while. And then the horrible message from Sal live on my cell phone was that he spoke with Bruno's son Daryl, who confirmed that Bruno Sammartino had died. I was at my daytime work office, and it was hard to react. I told one of my coworkers I was just leaving for a minute, and went down to my car and had a good cry. Just in such a state of shock. Bruno gone? There's no way. Bruno Sammartino. So I want to, first of all, wish condolences to his family, his friends, and of course the fans. I remember all the years that I chronicled his career as a reporter and photographer, and then became personal friends with him. But all the years of just the anxious anticipation at places like Madison Square Garden, 22,000 fans packing that place every time he appeared, and there was no entrance music like today. The only music was 22,000 people chanting, Bruno, Bruno, Bruno. And in my head, because I was a professional and I couldn't show any fan emotion, but in my head, my arms were going up and my smile was there, and I was chanting, Bruno, Bruno, Bruno. So let me take you back to some memories from the APTER kitchen here of Bruno. I generally, I do all this stuff right off the top of my head, but I didn't want to miss anything, so I thought I'd just jot some notes down. So when I was a little kid, I saw the TV debut on the Capitol Wrestling show from Washington, D.C. of what Ray Morgan, the broadcaster, called the Italian Superman, Bruno Sammartino. The man had never been knocked off his feet. Never been knocked off his feet. And week after week, from the shows on Thursday nights from the Capitol Arena or on Saturdays from Bridgeport, Connecticut, I marveled about how this guy just stuck his chest out, and when a guy like Chet Wallach would bump into him, Bruno would just bump him right off. And then one night I was watching with my grandmother, who told me all that wrestling is fixed. Grandpa did too. And Bruno was wrestling a guy named Tiger Jack Vansky. And I said, Grandma, this guy's never been knocked off his feet. He's the Italian Superman. Vansky came off the ropes, and Bruno went to do what he did with everybody else, and he lost balance, and Bruno fell down for the first time I had ever seen it. Years later, I would tell him about it, and he'd go, "You know that doggone Jack Vansky, you never knew what that guy was going to do." So yeah, I remember that. Back in the 60s, I did a radio show in New York. And I remember getting tickets to a show down at Sunnyside Garden in Queens, New York. Wrestling tickets. And Bruno was on that show. I said, man, I'm going to go down. I'm going to interview Bruno. And the promoter, Mike Rosenberg, and the McMahon agent, Vince McMahon senior agent, Oscar Keneal, took me to Bruno. And it was great. It was like we were old friends. I told him about Tiger Jack Vansky, of course. And we did a whole interview. And of course, like a regular reporter, two things. I said, Bruno, I can take you. And he looked at me and he said, "You can take me where? To the movies? To dinner?" With great sense of humor. But I said, people want to know, is wrestling fixed? He didn't know I was going to come out with that book. I didn't know it was broken. And he went on to show me how many times his nose was broken, his cauliflower ears, and all the other injuries that went on. It was pretty ugly. But it was then that I just started understanding that Bruno loved and protected the business. He was an athlete, and he was a gentleman, because he treated everyone, the promoters, the other wrestlers, the press, and his fans, with respect. A total gentleman. So when I first started working for the magazines, I got into the dressing rooms quite a bit. And Gorilla Monsoon had told Bruno that I was working for Stanley Weston, the man who did a story called This Is Your Life, Bruno Sammartino. Bruno was very upset at that story because he said it contained a lot of falsehoods. He didn't like it, and although he personally started to like me, if I'm representing that company that put out Inside Wrestling and the wrestler, he would prefer not to do anything. So I said, wait. Let me do a tape, an audio tape, a cassette tape with you about the life of Bruno Sammartino. I was going out on a limb. I didn't know that Mr. Weston would accept what I was doing. Maybe I would be fired when I came back to the office the next day. So Bruno agreed. We sat down for over an hour, and I did the life story of Bruno Sammartino. Went back to the office the next day, and I told Mr. Weston, if we want to stay in the good graces of the WWWF and Bruno, we needed to run this as a quote-unquote shoot interview. I didn't use that terminology. I didn't know it existed. I said it's a legit interview. And Mr. Weston was shocked because he thought it was a great story. I said, we need to do this. So 2 months later, Bruno Sammartino, in Q&A, probably the first shoot interview ever done in a wrestling magazine, was published. And from then on, Bruno Sammartino started endorsing me to everyone. And he always said to me that he always appreciated the reporter that went out and asked him for quotes on a story rather than fabricating anything to make it sensational. So that started my really good professional, and I could tell personal, relationship with Bruno Sammartino. I'm going to jump around a little bit here in terms of stories. When Bruno was about to lose the title to Ivan Koloff, it was the most well-guarded secret in professional wrestling. This is in my book. Willie Gilsberg, the promoter, called Stanley Weston, who called me into an office and said, "You make like you've never heard this." and he told me what was going to happen. My dad used to come to the matches with me all the time, and I never told my dad. He was on the ring shooting with an Instamatic camera next to me with a $59 Minolta camera. And as you know, Bruno lost the belt, and Bruno never knew that I knew, by the way. And I remember Willie Gilsenberg, one of the promoters, saying, "I hope you have a lot of film." My dad scooped me. We both got the picture, but his picture with the little chunky camera was a lot better. Bruno always treated my father with such respect. He'd go over, he'd be talking to Vince McMahon and Willie Gilsenberg, and he'd hold on for a minute. "Hello, Mr. Apter, how are you?" Always treated my dad as like a gentleman. The days when I used to, I have dozens and dozens of cassette interviews with Bruno. We used to talk about tough opponents, and there were two guys he always mentioned to me were his toughest opponents, Ken Patera and Bobby Duncombe. When Bruno's neck was broken in the match with Stan Hansen, he called me and he told me what hospital he was in. It's in Pittsburgh, Providence Hospital, I believe it was. And he invited me to come to his bedside and be the only reporter to do a story on him and his Dr. Sivitries. I did that. Thank you, Bruno, for letting me do that. I remember at Sunnyside Garden, that area back in Queens where I grew up watching wrestling, they had a street fair one day. This is about 10 years after he had gone into his first retirement. And big street festival, thousands of people waiting for John Stamos. And Bruno was the number 2 guy on the bill. I was lucky enough to introduce Bruno to the crowd, and John Stamos was not in their mind anymore. I could have kept Bruno there for a week. Stamos did eventually get on there, but Bruno Sammartino was the star of the day. I visited his house several times in Pittsburgh, met his lovely wife, Carol. Carol, I'm so sorry. I know you've had your health problems as well. In the dugout, at Shea Stadium, the magnificent matches that Bruno had against Larry Zbyszko. I talked to Larry earlier today just to commiserate with him. But in the dugout, Bruno and I watched the Inoki Ali fight from Japan. And if you go to the WWE website, just put in Bill Apter interviews Bruno Sammartino about Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki. It'll come up there. But anytime I needed anything exclusively, he was always there. He was always there to pose for me. He never said no. He never said no to me. He was always, again, the ultimate professional. And times I went to dinner with him and all that, that there were no still cameras and no recording devices. We talked about families, and he was so dedicated to his family. I saw him for the last time last year, 2017, at WrestleMania, at the Hall of Fame party, the pre-party. And he was there. He was hanging out with his son, Daryl, and Dominic DeNucci, and me. And my son, Brandon, was with me. Brandon knows who Bruno is, but Brandon wasn't around in that era. But he appreciates what I've told him about who Bruno was. So we talk about who Bruno was. Bruno is. He always will be. He is an iconic name in not just the world of wrestling, but the world of sports. The Greatest Sports Legends TV show did a special on Bruno. And I was there that night at a dinner that they had, and boxer Larry Holmes came over to me because I was friendly with him, and he said to me, "That Bruno Sammartino?" He said, "I want to meet him." and I introduced Larry to Bruno, and Larry never forgot that. That was one of Larry's heroes. Bruno Mars, if you can Google this, is named after Bruno Sammartino because Bruno Mars' father was a huge fan of Bruno Sammartino. Who wasn't a big fan of Bruno Sammartino? Everyone that I talked to who wrestled against Bruno Sammartino felt it an honor to be an opponent of this man who is the only living legend in professional wrestling. And I'm going to keep saying living legend because, Bruno, your memory will keep you alive in all of our hearts forever. I haven't talked to you in almost a year. And again, when I got that call from Sal today, I was totally devastated. So personally, thank you for your professionalism and being the first person to ever endorse me to the other wrestlers when they came over and said, Bruno, should I talk to this guy? Is he okay? And you said yes. I can't thank you enough for that. And secondly, for your honesty and friendship. I'll always love you.